Well, I'd have to start with biology. So we're a biological company. So I think about what is an ecosystem in nature, and it is a circumstance where living creatures, be plants and animals, as well as non-living things, systems, water, weather, soils come together to create this optimum conditions for life. So if I translate that into our world, well, obviously in an innovation ecosystem, it's very similar. You have people and entities, these are the living things, and also abstract things like money or ideas or knowledge, and those things being quite different. So to me, it is when those things exist in such a way that they provide that ideal environment for innovation to occur. That's a great question. And I think I should answer by saying that, your question leads me to wonder that myself and ask myself this question: have I taken some of these ecosystems for granted? Now, we exist in many ecosystems. So academic ecosystems, funding ecosystems, business ecosystems. That's the nature of our business. Why are they important to us? Well, everybody needs a circumstance in which to thrive. If in our case, we need to be able to bring in probably three things that are critical to the ecosystem that we're involved in, or ecosystems that we're involved in. The first of those is knowledge. We're a knowledge business. We cannot possibly create all the knowledge that we need. There's a wealth of it out there. We need to both share our knowledge for it to be meaningful, but also bring in new knowledge. The second one is slightly different. It's about talent. It's the people who have knowledge or ideas. And that's the third one is this idea of ideas. So you've got knowledge, people, and ideas, those things being different from one another. Of course, we need resources. We need physical places to be, things to work on, et cetera, and everybody needs the resource, which is money. But nonetheless, for us, we bring together those three things, and then we know we're in an ecosystem that's working for us. Not for ecosystems, or not a deliberate one. And this is a gap for us, something that this conversation has actually spurred. So thank you, Bridget. We are beginning on that journey now to ask ourselves the question, to be conscious about, I guess, the world that we're living in. So I view it as being a little bit similar to the journey that many people are on with sustainability or circularity, where for a long time we take things for granted. We expect that certain services or ideas or knowledge or people or other things will turn up. And yet suddenly there's a gap and you go, wow, this is a real challenge. We haven't taken the environment that we're in and its complexity as seriously as we should. So for us, with the pace of innovation increasing, perhaps we've seen some things which we are not part of and that we would like to be, or areas of our business that can't move as fast as we would like. Or we see something new happening that we want to be part of, and now that's forcing us to stand back and say, okay, we need to look a little broader. So we are starting to build this a deliberate strategy about how we engage in that way, just as we are with sustainability. So I view it as being very much the same. Another tough question. I think pre-COVID, I might have said, oh, it's quite important. Now, the world suddenly changes and closeness becomes a completely different concept. Personally, for our business, very much based on people, I think being close is still very important. But close doesn't have to be about physicality, there is more to it than physicality. Close is about ideas. It's about being stimulated by the same things, being able to take certain things for granted, having similar things on your agenda. So if I was making it purely about physicality, the world has been turned upside down and I'm less sure. But if I think about what closeness really means to us, then it's a closeness of spirit has become more important. And that might sound a little soft in a business context, but nonetheless, it's true for us. Yeah, I think when we talked earlier and we talked about what an ecosystem was and having to be conscious about the ecosystem, yeah. I think there's a casuality that has to occur. So my previous comments around closeness, I think that great things can happen when seeing somebody who provides a service within the ecosystem to you or is related to you in the ecosystem that perhaps you take for granted, but you're able to see them casually. It's not a surprise. Very important thing, a very important thing. You can structure everything, but a certain amount needs to happen casually, and you have to be aware of it. So again, it's like being aware of your environment. So for us, we are involved on campuses. We operate one campus of our own, and we're trying to bring more people to it. But equally on campuses where we work on, we do find that physical proximity and that needing to share, right, is a good way of keeping minds open. It's impossible to overstate. Pre-COVID, of course, perhaps less important. I think COVID has shown us the importance of those digital connections. I just cannot envision an ecosystem working well in analog. And if I explain what I mean, it's not just about connection. It's not just about me being able to talk to you here, but so much of the world that we experience is digital, right? It might be the news we consume. It might be the way we entertain ourselves. It might be the way we connect. It might be the way that we share information. But all of these things are digital. And if they are not strong within an ecosystem, I frankly cannot imagine the ecosystem being able to operate. It doesn't overtake the physical or the personal, the direct interaction, the exchange of goods or ideas face to face. But if it's not happening, then I wonder if the world would be real, to be fair. Of growing importance would be how I would answer that, Roger. We're a business that works primarily with large established entities. They're still highly innovative, but they are mature, broadly speaking, in terms of their products and overall products and services or approaches to the marketplace. That's great. That allows you to do a lot of things long-term, at scale, very well thought out. But there's also a huge need within that environment for new ideas. And with the best will in the world, it can be difficult to bring new ideas out of large established systems, no matter how successful they are. This is a well-recognized concept. So for us, the ability to connect with people with new ideas, doing things smaller, doing things faster, doing things with less money or with new people or from a different angle is really important. It keeps you on your toes. It keeps you alive. It teaches you new things, and it keeps you fresh. I think this varies depending on what the ecosystem is really trying to deliver. So firstly, I think they must deliver connection. Okay? So they must accentuate the very nature of the ecosystem. And how they do that is irrelevant. It might be digital, it might be in person, it doesn't matter, but they must do that. And part of that is also about they have a strong role of ensuring that everyone in the ecosystem, or all the entities or the actors in the ecosystem, recognize that they are in that ecosystem. So to my earlier comments around, in order for it to be sustained, you must be conscious about where you are. And I think that's a really vital role. And they must support the vital functions of that ecosystem. And those might not be the ones which are the most obvious. Right? So I imagine that for each entity which is in that position. They will need to look very carefully at what are the aspects of this ecosystem that needs support, and that might change also over time. So I don't believe that they'd be in a position where they could say, okay, well, our sole role is to connect people like this, or to make sure that these funding streams are available, or what have you, or to make sure there's this input of ideas. Ecosystems come under challenge in different ways at different times. So I think that for them, they must always have their finger on the pulse of change and be able to commentate that change, support that change, resist it, perhaps even, or question it. And to make it visible that that change is going on. I think if I come back to my earlier definition of an ecosystem, and I think about those things that needed to be in there, and I think, okay, for us, is there ideas flowing, right? Are genuinely new things happening? Is there growth? An ecosystem doesn't just sustain a set amount of life. It must all, to be flourishing, there must be an appropriate level of new life, and there must be change. So if every player in the ecosystem is not evolving, then I would suggest that that ecosystem, while successful, ultimately will not endure, because there needs to be evolution. So I'd always look for evolution of the entities themselves and or the organizations, and how they're interacting with one another. There must be a degree of conscious and deliberate and recognizable change, even if it's over a long time frame. KPIs. Well, I guess I would look for a KPI that was about membership. So or whether that's a formal membership or just a recognized feeling that you're part of something. I think that I would look for economic activity to a certain extent, okay, within the entity, or impact. I work in a science organization. Often we discount what the economic benefit is, and we think about, well, how much positive change are we creating? So is there positive change in this space? Do the players in that ecosystem recognize that it is the ecosystem delivering that outcome? Right? So are they conscious? That would be a KPI to me, because as I say, if you're not conscious of it, then you risk underinvestment or underengagement, and ultimately that can be fatal to the ecosystem itself. So those might be three that I'd put forward. Yeah. Coming back again, earlier definition is have you created a system where there is interconnectivity to the extent that it develops the environment for all, almost unconsciously. Right? So, okay, if you fail to do that, you fail to create enough diversity, you fail to create the right linkages, then you won't get that network effect that occurs within a real ecosystem. And that would be different, I think, depending on how complex or widespread the ecosystem you were developing was. But in terms of failure of an established ecosystem, look to nature. Why do ecosystems fail? They encounter something for which they're not adapted, or they're not able to adapt fast enough to that challenge. Failure in an ecosystem could be entirely reasonable. It could fail because it ceases to be relevant or needed because it has been surpassed by something else. Probably fairly unlikely. The ecosystem shouldn't fail. That type of sudden change doesn't happen in nature. They should evolve, right? And that ecosystem might primarily develop to support certain types of life and be primarily reliant on different, say, climatic factors, for example, for its success. But as the climate changes, that ecosystem should be able to adapt and support different types of life, but still be performing its main function, which is bringing those players who are in it, those entities, those organisms, those systems, those concepts that are part of it, and integrating them. So, total failure probably means you've either had a really big shock or you had some poor design in the first place. I don't think that we could say that we were prepared for a shock of the nature of COVID, but we had some existing things that enabled us to cope, right? So it meant that that shock was not fatal for us as an organisation. So we had a lot of social capital, very important in this case, right? We could not have guessed how much the social capital that we'd invested in between our people and within our organisation, which is distributed across New Zealand and many respects the world, would come to the fore. Okay, so it became a strategic advantage in this sort of world. And going forward, we're a mission-based organisation with a mandate to do good. Well, it just so happens that the type of challenge that the world's thrown up is probably pretty good for that type of organisation going forward, right? So that is serendipity, okay? Or maybe we pick up on some advantages for things that we build for other reasons. There are other reasons why we were not destroyed economically or in terms of our operations. So we were distributed. We had some resiliency because we could work in different ways and in different places. All these things were valuable to us. In terms of preparing going forward, there's an analogy I like to use, and the word I look for is calmness. I think in the case of any challenge, being able to remain calm is vital, you know, and they will teach you this on any course where they talk about disasters or first aid or what have you. And I like to think about a pilot. And you know, they experience some sudden engine failure, a bird flies into the engine, what have you, you know. Now, he or she has split seconds to decide what to do, but they have a list to work through in their head, right? And this is why they choose certain people to play this role, huh? They choose people who immediately look for a set of options, right? And don't panic. They breathe calmly and they work through. And I think as an organisation, that's something that we've been able to do. Now, what engenders that calmness? Sure, pilots have checklists. They know the things that they need to check off as they go. Also, having good people around you, a sense of trust, confidence, a sense in your own ability. Maybe 2 or 3 really good plan Bs. You've got a parachute. Maybe an experience of something similar, and the ability to be able to recall that experience. So again, it's a consciousness and a calmness. I think these days that the buzzword is mindfulness. But I think above all, you get through tough times. It's going to sound a bit of a cliche, but you get through tough times by being good and being nice and being rational. I think in the unique situation that we had initially, there was not a specific role that I can think of for a support organisation, for us at least, not within that ecosystem. That has now changed. Okay, so everyone in the ecosystem has been challenged in some way, shape, or form, and we all need to rebuild. We all need new ideas. We all need new ways to connect. We need friends. Right? We need to know there's somebody else there. That's part of the human condition, and of course it exists within organisations which are populated with frail humans. So this is where the role comes in, helping us understand what has changed in our environment and helping us all adapt to the shock that we've come to now. The actions they can take to make sure that that's effective, I can't guess at now, but certainly that is their role. It is to help us understand partially the new world we're in and suggest to us new ways in which we can work, and also to recognise the things that we are doing and to help us share them and to help other parts of the ecosystem adapt to that. So I see a very, very strong future, possibly more than ever before.